Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. Obviously, as I'm sure we're all aware because it's inescapable, we are living through a global pandemic and every single one of us in our individual and particular ways are having to deal with the very peculiar consequences of that event. And so, of course, I understand that certain news items are not going to get the coverage they might have done in other circumstances. And in the name of full disclosure, the particular news item that I wish to talk about today may not have been deemed to be front page news by many editors. In fact, it's probably just people like us that find it fascinating and potentially a little bit troubling. Because the news item in question is the potential sale and exportation of a 15th century manuscript, the collected scientific works of Lewis Caerleon. So who was Lewis Caerleon? And what about him makes this work of his a potential object of national historical significance? Caerleon was a Welshman, born in the first half of the 1400s. He attended the University of Cambridge where he read medicine and eventually he qualified as a physician. In 1466, the University of Cambridge fined Caerleon 20 shillings for failing to deliver some lectures in medicine which he was promised to do. Perhaps this might be explained by the fact that, as we will see, Caerleon's interest in medicine seems to have been eclipsed by an interest in astronomy and political intrigue. In fact, Caerleon's medical training made him particularly apt for engaging in political intrigue. As a qualified physician, he could enter spaces and move between individuals completely unchallenged. This man, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, took the throne as Richard III. And I have made a video on the chain of events that led up to this, which I will leave linked in a card. When this happened, it is believed that Lewis Caerleon acted as a vital go-between for two high-profile women. One of these women was Elizabeth Woodville, the widow of Edward IV, mother of the Prince in the Tower and Elizabeth of York, future wife of King Henry VII. Elizabeth Woodville had fled to sanctuary at Westminster Abbey following her husband's death. Apparently, she was fearful of the plans of her brother-in-law, Richard of Gloucester. As it would turn out, she perhaps had cause. The physician Caerleon was one of the few people who would have been able to obtain unfettered and unsupervised access to the Dowager Queen, his patient. The other woman was Lady Margaret Beaufort, mother of just one child, Henry Tudor, heir to the Earl of Richmond and the future King Henry VII. Caerleon is said to have brokered a deal between these women that would see their children, Elizabeth and Henry, marry, defeat Richard and sit on the thrones of the King and Queen of England. Unfortunately for all the schemers, this plot was uncovered. Lady Margaret Beaufort had a bill of attainder issued against her in January 1584, and it is believed that Lewis Caerleon was placed in the Tower of London at around the same time. However, with Henry Tudor's victory over Richard III at Bosworth Field on the 22nd of August 1485, Lewis Caerleon's fortunes were forever changed. Henry's government granted him a pension of 40 marks a year for life. This was soon increased to 60 marks a year. In 1488, he became a Knight of the King's Arms in St George's Chapel, Windsor. This gave him the right of free residence in the outer ward of the castle. As I mentioned earlier, while we were exploring the biography of Lewis Caerleon, there is little surviving evidence that points to him having much, if any, interest in medical literature and study. Quite the contrary, he seems to have been far more preoccupied with other scientific disciplines, in particular astronomy. And it is that topic that is the focus of the manuscript that we are going to look at today. On the 13th of March 2020, this press release was published on the gov.uk website. A 15th century manuscript that sheds new light on medieval scientific knowledge could be lost abroad. Culture Minister Caroline Dinenage has placed a temporary export bar on the manuscript, which is worth £300,000, in a bid to save the work for the nation by offering a UK buyer or institution an opportunity to purchase the work for the national collection. The manuscript was completed by Lewis of Caerleon, and they offered this lifespan for him, circa 1440 to circa 1500. Lewis of Caerleon was a highly skilled astronomer who carried out observations and recorded detailed calculations aimed at predicting eclipses. He commissioned this beautifully bound manuscript from a professional scribe as a gift to a patron or library, to showcase his own scientific achievements. While some of its texts and tables are similar to those in Lewis's personal notebook held in the collections of Cambridge University Library, a number are unique to this manuscript and hold the potential to shed new light on late medieval mathematical astronomy. Culture Minister Caroline Dinenage said, "This manuscript is an important part of the story of how ancient beliefs led our modern scientific understanding of the world we live in. It is a remarkable piece by a Welsh scholar that would make an excellent contribution to the national collection. I hope a buyer can be found so we can keep this important work in the UK." The Minister's decision follows the advice of the Reviewing Committee on the Export of Works of Art and Objects of Cultural Interest, also known by the acronym RCEWA. The committee noted that the manuscript displayed the progression from ancient theories of astronomy towards a modern mathematical approach. They agreed that Lewis of Caerleon was a significant contributor to the study of astronomy and the development of science in the late medieval era. Committee member Peter Barber said, "This beautifully written volume, still in its handsome original binding, was made for presentation, very possibly to Henry VII. Its author, a Welshman serving a Welsh king, a patriotic antiquary who was also a physician/scientist, prefigured the great figures of a century later, like John Dee, while himself building on the writings of his medieval predecessors. At a time when astronomy and astrology were synonymous, Lewis of Caerleon's skills had political ramifications. They may well have contributed to Richard III's decision to keep him out of harm and the later Henry VII's way in the Tower. The text was meant by Lewis, who annotated it in his own hand, to be the definitive version of all his writings and calculations. It includes notes on how far his predictions of eclipses had been fulfilled, and also versions of hitherto only partly known writings by medieval scholars. It would be a great pity if this volume by an early Welsh scholar who deserves to be better known, with its links to courtly culture, with a distinguished provenance and with its immense research potential, were to be allowed to leave this country. The RCEWA made its recommendation on the grounds of the manuscript's outstanding significance to the study of medieval mathematical and scientific knowledge, and for the Welsh contribution to the history of science in the British Isles. Lastly, but arguably most vitally, the press release finishes thus. The decision on the export licence application for the manuscript will be deferred until the 12th of June 2020. This may be extended until the 12th of September 2020 if a serious intention to raise funds to purchase it is made at the recommended price of £300,000. So why do I feel that this paragraph is vitally important for us to pay attention to? Well, with the backdrop of the COVID-19 crisis, I wonder how many of these debates and fundraising attempts can really be taking place before the 12th of June, or for that matter, the 12th of September of this year. If we really believe that this is a vitally important manuscript, which I certainly do, perhaps we should be thinking about deferring this discussion and decision until much later, at least until 2021. Well, what do you think? Do let me know in the comments section down below. Also, if you see any petitions about deferring this decision until later, pop those down there as well so that we can all sign and support it. Of course, I will be sure to pop the web address for this press release on gov.uk in the description box down below so you can check it out for yourselves and also keep track of any updates that might come in. When discussing the potential sale and export of this manuscript, there is one aspect of the discussion that is completely obscure to me, and it may be for good reason, because it remains unclear, as far as I can see, who the current owner or holder of the manuscript is. If we look at this blog site, this one is written by one Peter Kidd, a medieval manuscripts expert researcher. On his blog, he talks about medieval manuscripts and their provenance, and he has helpfully written this piece about his experience examining and cataloguing this very manuscript for its owner. This is an unnamed owner in this blog, but it's the person who was holding it in 2009. And from that, I am led to assume that it's the person who is still holding it and currently attempting to sell it. He includes some amazing high-resolution images of the manuscript as well. So while I am scrolling through the blog here in the video, I will of course be sure to leave a link to it in the description box so you can check it out for yourselves. The blog is dated to the 15th of March 2020, so 2 days after the government press release. And Peter Kidd is referring to this as the Macclesfield copy of the works of Lewis Caerleon. He explains that he catalogued it for the owner in 2009 and revised his description for an exhibition in 2014. He explains that the volume seems to have been written under the author's direct supervision, with his name being written in several places. He explains that it's a large volume and shows this in the image. The blind stamped binding is contemporary and unrestored. Some of the stamps appear to be unrecorded. The lower edge of the front board has a scar, showing where a chain staple has been removed, demonstrating that the volume was once in a chained library. From this point on in the blog, Peter Kidd gives us a real gift, an incredibly detailed list of the institutions and individuals who owned this manuscript down the years. It starts, which chained library? Lewis was a graduate of Cambridge University and had a special interest in the work of scientists at Merton College, Oxford, some of whom are mentioned in the text. The fact that the present volume is more handsome than any other surviving copy of Caerleon's work suggests that he may have intended it as a presentation copy, and he is known to have given copies of his eclipse tables to the universities of Cambridge and Oxford. More specifically, a copy of his works is recorded in the medieval libraries of Clare College, Cambridge, and Lewis gave a copy to Merton College, Oxford, in October 1490. But neither copy survives in those collections today. Interestingly here, Peter Kidd is asserting that this is designed as a gift for a university, rather than as a potential presentation copy for Lewis Caerleon's king, Henry VII, which seems to be what the gov.uk website is hinting at. Peter Kidd goes on. The next two owners provide possible links with Merton and Cambridge. Peter Kidd draws our attention to this marginal annotation, written by an unidentified 16th century reader. The annotation draws special attention to mentions in the text of Simon Brendan and Richard of Wallingford. Kidd explains that both of these men were connected to Merton College, Oxford. Sir Henry Spelman records his purchase of this manuscript on the 11th of April 1606 in the upper edge of the first page. Sir Henry Spelman was educated at Cambridge, and as Peter Kidd explains, from 1590 to 1612, the period during which he bought this manuscript, he was living in Norfolk, which was an adjacent county. With Spelman's death, his manuscripts passed to his heirs. One of these heirs sold them to the London bookseller John Harding, who eventually auctioned them on the 28th of November 1709. The next named owner of this manuscript is the barrister Walter Clavell. With his death in 1740, his library, including this manuscript, is catalogued and prepared for auction. The auction begins on the 29th of March 1742 and seemingly continues for a number of days afterwards. Through the auction of Walter Clavell's library, this manuscript next makes its way into the hands of William Jones, who Peter Kidd describes as a Welsh scientist, mathematician, friend of Sir Isaac Newton and tutor of George Parker. This same George Parker, 2nd Earl of Macclesfield, would go on to purchase many medieval manuscripts from his former tutor, William Jones, including the one we are talking about today. Peter Kidd finishes by explaining how the manuscript remained in the library of the next 7 earls, down to one Richard Timothy George Mansfield Parker, the 9th Earl of Macclesfield, who lived at Sherborne Castle. I am assuming that it was this Earl of Macclesfield that put this manuscript, along with a number of other medieval manuscripts, up for sale at Sotheby's on the 22nd of June 2004. It is at this point that the trace of the owner, individual or institution of this manuscript becomes obscured. Somebody or an institution clearly buys it from Sotheby's in 2004. It is this person or collective of individuals that employs Peter Kidd to catalogue it in 2009, and they remain nameless. I am also assuming that the person or people who asked Peter Kidd to catalogue this manuscript for them are still the ones who hold it, and the ones who are currently attempting to sell it. I firmly believe that items of historic, cultural and national significance should not be permitted to be purchased and held by private owners. Rather, I believe they should be held by public institutions, places where we are able to gain access to them. If not physically at all times, then certainly digitally and globally. I also happen to believe that a nation's treasures should be held within that nation. Of course, they can always be loaned abroad to other museums for their exhibitions. On this latter point, we are forced to confront the practices of our own museums and institutions. If officials of the British government are prepared to attempt to block the export of materials such as this, then I would argue that they are clearly acknowledging that they believe that a nation's treasures should stay in country. As always, I would love to read your thoughts on anything and everything I have discussed today, so please do pop them in the comment section beneath the video. Or you can come and find me over on my social media. As always, I'll be leaving links to my Instagram and Twitter in the description box. Follow me there and we can continue this conversation. I do hope you've enjoyed this video and found it interesting, useful and hopefully a little thought-provoking. If you did, then please let me know by hitting the thumbs up. Please also subscribe to this channel, and while you're there, why not hit the little notification bell next to the subscribe button so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.